The Rolling Stones Pacific Tour was scheduled to kick off 1973, starting on January 21st in Honolulu, Hawaii. Unfortunately, on the 23rd of December of 1972, Bianca Jagger's hometown of Managua, Nicaragua, was leveled by a devastating earthquake. Mick and Bianca chartered a jet in Kingston, Jamaica, where the Stones were working on Goat's Head Soup, and flew to Managua to search for Bianca's mother. They arrived with 2,000 typhoid vaccines and other medical supplies for those affected by the earthquake and found Bianca's mother relatively unharmed. A few days before the scheduled start of the tour, Mick made a surprise announcement that the band would play a benefit concert for the victims of the earthquake at the LA Forum in Inglewood, California on January 18th. The LA Forum benefit concert marked the first appearance of Keith's new 5-string guitar. This guitar was custom built for him by Ted Newman Jones, as Keith wanted a guitar that he could tune to open G and take the low 6th string off, which would be tuned to D in open G tuning. This way the 5th string, which was dropped down to G, would be the root note, and Keith would be free to strum the guitar without having to worry about avoiding the 6th string, which would not be barred in a lot of his open G riffs. The Ted Newman Jones Custom No. 1 had a body shape that was similar to a smaller Gibson non-reverse Firebird. The body was made from cherry wood with a laminated Brazilian rosewood top made from xylophone keys. It had a bolt-on maple neck with a dot inlaid rosewood fingerboard with only 19 frets. The headstock had 2 gold Schaller tuners on the top side and 3 on the underside. For pickups, the guitar featured a black soap bar P90 in the neck position, and in the bridge was a Gibson PAF humbucker, which was taken from the middle position of one of Keith's Les Paul Customs. The bridge was a chrome-plated Leo Kwan Badass bridge with individually adjustable saddles. There is a black 3-ply plastic control plate on the lower right bout of the guitar where gold-plated volume and tone knobs and an input jack were mounted. A 3-way toggle switch was mounted in the upper left bout on another small black 3-ply rectangular plastic plate. This guitar would be a favorite of Keith's and was used extensively on the upcoming Pacific Tour and in the studio. The second new addition to Keith's guitar collection was a Polaris White Gibson SG Custom. This guitar had a mahogany body with a set mahogany neck and a bound ebony fingerboard with pearl block inlays. The triple bound headstock featured the diamond peghead inlay that was used on Gibson custom models. For pickups were 3 patent number humbuckers, which were wired to 2 volume and 2 tone knobs and a 3-way toggle switch from the factory. Keith's SG was also rewired with an additional toggle switch which was mounted to the white pickguard. The guitar had gold-plated Grover tuners and Tune-o-matic bridge and a Lyre Maestro Vibrola. Keith usually used the SG on Midnight Rambler and standard tuning with a capo on the 7th fret. Other electric guitars played on tour in 1973 were Keith's Gibson Les Paul Custom with the Alnico 5 staple pickup in the neck, Keith's Sunburst 59 Fender Stratocaster, the 54 Fender Telecaster, later called Macalber, and the 53 Fender Telecaster, later called Malcolm, now with the tongue sticker removed. The 1960 wine red Gibson Les Paul Jr. double cutaway, and the 3 Gibson Les Paul standards, the Yayas Les Paul, still with Clouson tuners and pickup covers off, revealing double black bobbins, the Les Paul with Schaller tuners and the pickup cover still on the humbuckers, and Mick Taylor's now main guitar, the newly acquired Les Paul with Schaller tuners and uncovered double black bobbin humbuckers. The pickguard was removed from this guitar, but the metal bar that fastened the pickguard to the body was left on. Acoustic guitars brought on the road were a Martin D45, a natural Gibson Hummingbird, and a new addition for Keith, Martin 00028. Bill Wyman stopped using Fender Mustangs as his main bass on this tour. At the LA Forum show, he used his Ampeg Dan Armstrong Plexi bass. Then on the Pacific tour, a Gibson EB3 became his main bass for the rest of the tour. Amplification was once again a backline of Ampeg SPTs. After the LA Forum show, beginning at the start of the Pacific tour, the wall of Ampegs was covered by a white scrim wall with a ladder for Mick Jagger to be able to access a light bulb lit catwalk on top of the amps. After the LA Forum benefit concert, on January 20th, the Stones flew to Hawaii to start the 1973 Far East Winter Tour. There they played 3 shows in Honolulu. The first show opened by ZZ Top, and then the next leg was supposed to be 6 shows in Japan, but was cancelled at the last minute.
Why was the visa in Japan denied or not granted?
Well, the visa was not granted because I had a drug conviction in 1969. But in October they said that they wouldn't worry about that because, as here, I mean, the rule is that you can't come in. But if it's only a marijuana conviction, they tend to give you a waiver if they're kind enough to do so. And they would do that. That's what they said they'd do in October. And 10 days ago, they just said, no, you can't come because you're too well known. So I said, because I'm too well known. So they said, yeah, because you're too well known. So I said, thank you. I wish you'd told me in October because we wouldn't have sold the tickets.
The Rolling Stones wouldn't play Japan until 1990. Because of the canceled Japanese leg of the tour, the band flew to LA from January 27th to the 30th to continue sessions for Goat's Head Soup at Village Recorder. The tapes that were brought in from Jamaica were labeled Muddy Waters so that they wouldn't be bootleg. Songs worked on were Separately, Foreign In, Give Us a Break, Coming Down Again, You Should Have Seen Her Ass, Starfucker, Doo Doo Doo, Heartbreaker, and Through the Lonely Hours, which would be released as Through the Lonely Nights in the future.
I knew she was gonna meet.
After the brief recording sessions, the Pacific tour restarted with the band flying to Australia on February 8th. The first show was in New Zealand on February 11th, followed by 9 shows in Australia, with the tour ending on February 27th in Sydney. The equipment used was the exact same as the first leg of the tour, with Keith favoring the Ted Newman Jones Custom No. 1, his 54 Telecaster, and the wine red Gibson Les Paul Jr. Mick Taylor continued using the Gibson Les Paul with removed pickguard, and Bill Wyman used his Gibson EB3. After the Pacific tour, May through July was spent on overdub and mixing sessions for Goat's Head Soup. The band took the work that had been done at Dynamic Sound Studios in Jamaica and left for England with sessions booked at Olympic Studios and Island Studios. Keith began spending a lot of time with Ronnie Wood, who was working on his first solo record at his house called The Wick in his home studio. On May 24th, while hanging out with Woody and Faces drummer Kenny Jones and David Bowie, Mick Jagger came up with the basic idea for It's Only Rock and Roll But I Like It, and originally it was intended to be written for Bowie to record. They would end up reclaiming the song for the new album and Keith would overdub guitar parts on it, but ended up keeping Woody's acoustic 12-string guitar track on the record, and Kenny Jones' original drumming would remain from the basic cut. Since Woody assisted Jagger in writing the song, he would reciprocate by helping with the opening track on his solo album, I Can Feel the Fire. On June 26th, Keith's house on Cheney Walk was raided by the police. Keith and Anita were arrested and charged for marijuana and an unlicensed .38 snub-nosed Smith & Wesson revolver given to Keith as a souvenir. The saving grace was that Keith pled guilty to something like 25 different charges, but the prosecutor got greedy and tried to tack on a bogus charge of Keith being in possession of a sawed-off shotgun. Keith pled not guilty to this as it was an antique miniature bird hunting shotgun from the 1800s and was built for a child and not an illegal firearm. The judge, being disgusted by the greed of the prosecution, released them on bail and fined Keith 125 pounds on firearm charges and 80 pounds on drug charges. Since that wasn't enough chaos, at the end of July, Keith's house, Redlands, which was under constant surveillance by the police, inexplicably caught fire due to a mouse chewing through electrical wire. Keith and Anita were able to escape with their family unharmed, but the roof of the house suffered extensive damage. The Stones shot promo videos directed by Michael Lindsay Hogg of Dancing with Mr. D, Silver Train, and 2 versions of Angie, which were broadcast from July to November on Top of the Pops and other programs. On Angie, Keith and Mick Taylor both played Gibson Hummingbirds, and Silver Train was the last sighting of the white SG Custom. Mick Taylor is playing slide on a Gibson ES345 with split parallelogram inlays. Goat's Head Soup was released on August 31st in the UK and September 12th in the US, reaching number 1. This would be the last album with Jimmy Miller as producer. He had an amazing run with the band, producing Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed, Sticky Fingers, Exile on Main Street, and Goat's Head Soup. The band arrived in Rotterdam, Amsterdam on August 19th through to the 30th for rehearsals for the upcoming European tour. Keith's 54 Fender Telecaster, the Ted Newman Jones Custom 5-string, and a Gibson Les Paul Custom with staple pickup are pictured at the rehearsals. Keith is also seen playing his wine red Gibson Les Paul Jr. For amplification, they are seen plugged into Silverface Fender Twin Reverbs and ST42 Ampeg 4x12 extension cabs. Bill Wyman is pictured with his Gibson EB3 bass. Billy Preston would be added to the lineup for the tour, mainly playing organ while Nicky Hopkins played piano. Mick Taylor's favored Gibson Les Paul with no pickguard also makes an appearance, as well as a new addition for the tour, a Sunburst Fender Stratocaster with rosewood fingerboard. On the tour, Mick Taylor would wear a fake afro to play an opening set with Billy Preston's band, and he's pictured playing his new Stratocaster. The tour kicked off in Vienna on September 1st and ended October 19th in West Berlin. The 21-city tour took the Stones through England, Scotland, Switzerland, Denmark, Sweden, the Netherlands, and Belgium. France was skipped as Keith had been banned from entering for 2 years. The gear for the tour was the same as the Pacific tour except for the addition of Mick Taylor's Stratocaster plus a new appearance for one of Keith's guitars. Mick Taylor favored the 2 Les Pauls with Schaller tuners. The main one had the pickguard removed. Keith favored the 54 Fender Telecaster, the Gibson Les Paul Jr., and the Ted Newman Jones Custom 5-string. This guitar is pictured for the first time with some minor changes at the Rotterdam rehearsals. Keith added decals from a Luftwaffe model kit onto the body and headstock. The Leo Kwan Badass Bridge was swapped out with a crude strip of wood with 2 pneumatic saddles on it. Also, a high level +7 sticker is placed underneath the bridge. The same high level +7 sticker would also be seen on Keith's wine red 1960 Gibson Les Paul Jr., and both stickers still remain on each guitar today. Ted Newman Jones went on the road with the Stones as Keith's guitar tech, handing him guitars between songs and working on them backstage. Other things of note that happened on tour: Bobby Keys informed Keith that his buddy Graham Parsons had died on September 19th. They then hopped in a car to try to find Uschi Obermeier in Munich. Keith barely knew her and they didn't speak the same language, but Keith wanted to take his mind off of Graham. Not a bad idea. He did end up finding her. Bobby Keys would be kicked off the tour before the second to last show in Belgium for refusing to go on stage and instead stayed in a bathtub filled with Dom Perignon with a French girl. it would take years for him to be reinstated in the band. This would also be the last live tour with Mick Taylor, but he would play on the next album. Sessions for It's Only Rock and Roll began briefly in Munich, Germany at Musicland Studios. Mick Taylor missed these initial sessions from November 14th to 25th, claiming that he was ill. The primary guitars used during Phase 1 was Keith's Les Paul Jr., the 54 Fender Telecaster, the Les Paul Custom with staple pickup, which Mick Jagger is pictured playing, and the Ted Nugent-Jones Custom. For amplification was Fender Twin Reverbs and Ampeg VT22 combos. Bill used his customized Dallas Tuxedo bass. The three pianists of Nicky Hopkins, Billy Preston, and Ian Stewart were all present. This was the first album produced by Mick and Keith, and would also mark the last album for engineer Andy Johns, who would be fired in Munich for hitting the hard stuff too hard like Jimmy Miller. After these initial sessions wound down on December 19th, Heartbreaker, backed with Dancing with Mr. D, was released as the follow-up single to Angie and would reach number 15. The Stones would take a break before entering the studio again for Phase 2 after the new year. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't, and stay tuned for what's next, probably 1974.